Hello, everybody. I'm here today with the wonderful Tony Blake, and we've been talking just now, just the two of us, talking about the Gurdjieff work, and then we thought, well, we'll do a little show about it, what we were kind of discussing and what's on Tony's mind today. So what is it, Tony?
Oh, so many profound things on my mind today. But let's try and steer a path through one aspect of these, which has been with me for decades, perhaps. First connected with what is called the work with Mr. Bennett. And when I was a very young man, and there were my elders, some of which I was very fond of and admired. But I was rather astonished in those days that they would seem to imply and sometimes absolutely vocally explain about how they divided the work from their lives. The work was sort of special things they did, and which were not quite distinct from the things they did in life, with their jobs or whatever it was. And this shocked me at the time, and it still continues to shock me. But I feel that maybe a number of people have this kind of dichotomy between what they get up to in the work. For example, they sit cross-legged in the morning and do something mysterious, or they do these special movements, you see, or spend hours digging in somebody's garden, inwardly reciting lists of words or whatever they get up to, or they read complicated books. And there was a background critique, of course, in the work of not retiring from the world and not relying on protected circumstances in order to do something special. And we often have quoted to be in the world but not of it, which I might refer to again in a minute. Excuse me. So there is this question of what is our ordinary life to do with the work? Yeah. I'm hinting that if you start off with the idea that this ordinary life is like inferior to what we call the work activity, then one is on, I think, a hiding to nothing, because then it means most of one's time is devoted to this everyday life, say, getting up, washing, looking after the kids, going to work, or getting on a bus, whatever it is. And all of that is just going to be treated as inferior or meaningless or something like that. This is, I mean, just a broad tendency. It's not absolutely literally true, of course.
So kind of like when in the olden days Christians used to be Christians on a Sunday when they went to
Right, yes. Oh,
Monday
that's
to
right. That's
Friday.
right. And it has the same thing, don't you, in the piety you put on Sunday, just like the piety people have in the work when they go to their group meetings, so their faces get longer and they look serious and thoughtful, this kind of thing.
So it's about trying to put it into our everyday lives.
Yeah, and and this is, of course, Gurdjieff's strong claim that there's this fourth way, which was in life, and he gave some pointers towards it. But I think these pointers have to be elaborated and clarified in quite so many ways to see what actually happens. And I want to say at the outset, it may not be able to convince you of it, or this, but there is a fundamental property of, I'm going to use these terrible words like ordinary life and ordinary people and the general culture, these generalities. So forgive me for that. Really is asleep. That's what he kept on saying, and people would go, "Oh yeah, that's a nice idea." Of course, people can be asleep in general and in principle, and it's like a piece of literature, and it's interesting and evocative and all that kind of thing. But then you try to grapple with it, and it's not so easy to sort out because you are yourself in question, and this can become difficult and uncomfortable to sort out. You know, you think, oh, here I am, you know, I'm solving a differential equation. Aren't I being a conscious being now? And somebody, no, I say, not really. And I can go on there just a moment, do my sidebars about this. The times I've been involved in mathematics, not all that many. One with this incredible mathematician, Spencer Brown, and he's working on what's called the axiomatization of ordinary arithmetic, which is a challenging thing. And I got so captivated for days. I went on doing these, and I had these calculations in my head, these principles. I'd wake up doing the calculations and so on. And it's kind of being born on me. It was all happening by itself anyway, these clever equations. And one time, when I was in Cambridge, I was doing the history and philosophy of science, talking to one of my professors. I just went to his house and listening to our common love of Schoenberg. And he started talking about Immanuel Kant and all this kind of thing. And I just saw myself spouting this stuff. It's just all by itself. I didn't need to think about it. So Gurdjieff's model at the time, of course, was a gramophone record.
Or mechanical talking, doesn't he call it that as well?
That as well, but I want mechanical record. I want to segue to what is it now? We've got these disk drives. You see, we got it's the same principle, I suppose, but it's now digitalized. But he caught on to this, drawing attention to the mechanism and a contemporary for him technological demonstration of it. And he was fascinated by recording, and as he really loved that woman who recorded his harmonium in Paris, called a master of vibrations or something like that. But yeah, so pausing again with this is uncomfortable because it's a sticking point, because you see, we say, why is the Gurdjieff work not popular and so on? Because, well, I think it's very simply, people don't like to be being told that they are sleeping machines.
People don't like putting effort in, and they want to be told the answer. I noticed that a lot as well.
How do you mean told the answer?
They want to be given it. They don't want to have to go and work. You know, Gurdjieff says we have to work on ourselves. And
Okay, yeah.
Here's the sentence, and you're better. You'll be fine.
No, really. As the hour in his books told, you are asleep. You are machines and so on. And at a time when he was, of course, beginning of the 20th century, in the circles where he was in the circles of privileged people, had money, reputation, kudos, authority, and all the rest of it. That's gone through terrible traumas in all the 20th century. We've seen what's happened. And he gives in his book, Philosophers tells us in there, he talks about, or is it in a certain regular, he talks about this rich, well-off Russian and his day. And it's all the things that happens when his coffee is spilled, you know, and this kind of thing. He doesn't get the newspaper and all this beautiful, actually, bit of literature describing this man just full of himself, bouncing around like an idiot, reacting to everything, forgetting everything in his life. And he says, this is a conscious man, and he sneers at it.
And that starts off in the day, his coffee's not ready, servant's not delivered the newspaper, so he goes off to work in a bad mood. Then he sees some blonde woman, and the blonde woman gives him a lovely smile, and it makes him feel all good.
That's the one.
Work and something goes wrong. So it's that example. I've read that in the, I think it's in the Paris lectures or Paris talks. But anyway,
whatever it is, but he had to do that in parody because he wasn't quite so many. So really, I think highly gifted, skilled writer. And it's extraordinary, his writing ability. There, just tried to convince people about this. And Spencer talks about it because he was with the intelligentsia and he found they couldn't accept many of the things he talked about, you know, which particularly that point tries to explain to them what self-remembering means. And they say, oh, we do that already. And this became part of his reflective narrative from Gurdjieff's teaching, you know, about you are asleep, and you have this apparent consciousness. Well, that's a big thing, you know. You see, I'm talking to you now. Of course, I believe I'm conscious. You might even be conscious. I mean, it's unlikely, but you know, you kind of thing. But it sounds ridiculous. How can I go on?
People like to think that they are awake, don't they? People like to think they are conscious.
Yeah.
You're right. They don't want to be told they're asleep. I've had that problem with people when they've asked me to explain Gurdjieff's work, and I usually just say something like, "He's here to wake us up," and then they look at me as if to say, "But I am awake."
Well, I'm awake, yeah. But, this is, well, obviously you get it. I mean, this is a really, really a deep problem, because you get it's a kind of twist in it, of course. You're addressing somebody, saying, I'm saying you, Debbie, you are asleep, you know, and you're going, the first thing you're going to say, I'm bloody well not asleep. You're asleep. And you can get into an argument about this and so on. And then I'll add one of my favorite remarks to people, which I repeat, is to connection with this, the other side, about consciousness. You could always talk about consciousness and so on. And because of the context of what I'm talking about, you can suspect or regard this as all largely illusory. Because I say, look, this consciousness is about what is it, you define it, and you try to put it in the brain or not in the brain, or invoke spiritual powers, whatever it is. And I say, look, this is simple. It's a transactional thing. Because take the word conscious as itself, which actually affiliated to the word conscience, and which has science in it. It means to know together. And I took this literally and say, I mean, you and I, Debbie, we are together, we are knowing together. So what's effectively happening is implicitly, I am saying you're conscious, with the proviso, if you say I'm conscious.
Are you awake, Tony?
If you say so, dear. It's a collusion. That's why you might, yeah. And it gets terrifying. Isn't it must it be true? All the crazes in power around the world and so on. They are all in this collusion of accepting that how they're behaving, how they're operating is a conscious way. That's what it is. So it seems at this juncture to be just semantics. You know, look, this word conscious they're using, which has a lot of imagery in it and implication and depth to it and so on, which how people are applying it is misconstrued. And also, opposite to what they take it is when I wake up in the morning, I'm conscious. You see, that's it, you see. We won't get into stuff about dreams, are they account of consciousness, blah, blah, blah. No. That's it. And it carries on during the day and all the rest of it. And somebody comes around and said, no, it's actually a rare thing. And I think, well, that only, it seems, begins to touch people when they have the taste of what I call, without quotation marks, real consciousness. They have the taste, this is it.
What would that be? Just if someone said to you, well, what do you mean by real consciousness? What would that be implying to that person if they had it? Would they see the world differently to us? What is it that they've got if they're using their real consciousness that's making them different to all the people that are asleep?
It is. Well, that's one of those damn good hard questions. And say, first of all, you know, it would be very unlikely it could be given a verbal expression that would count for somebody else. You know, expression could be given not to count for somebody else, but I'll try and address it in this moment. That there is, oh yes, the best that can come of it is one of the features of it for me is the realization at the moment before I was not conscious.
Okay.
That's, I think that's the best pragmatic approach for me. And I think at times Gurdjieff draws attention to this. If that's the beginning of something, you realize you are not conscious. And suddenly observing this or hearing about it, see, this is crazy. You just don't become conscious, and you're saying that when you realize you're not conscious, you are conscious, and all these paradoxes and so on. But one might expect these paradoxes because consciousness is certainly, in intellectual terms, can certainly be attached to reflexivity. You know, it's not object-like. It's something you look at it and it looks back at you and changes the way you look at it. It's what I mean by this mirroring effect, which alters what it is. It's not a static thing. So that is the thing. And always with that a sense of surprise. Oh, like you say, sometimes you can get it in the mild form in like noticing something which is in front of your eyes all the time, and suddenly you notice it. You see, that's the spark of consciousness, you see. So it can be best, to answer your question, framed in terms of you see something which previously you did not see. And the word seeing is very important here, you see, so there it is. I remember a time that it changes, or history is your experience, and also your learning about various times with a girlfriend was years ago, and I was in, it's kind of, well, forgive me for whatever, claiming some kind of being awake and so on. And I burst into tears because I realized within 10 seconds I would be asleep again. And I couldn't prevent it. And that brought the experience home to me more than anything else, but certainly involved in it is this reversal, it's turning around, so it doesn't occur gradually. And you have to say this is a very important thing. You get this kind of change in consciousness, which goes like up, but then it can slowly decline afterwards. And that's the dangerous part, because it can merge back into your ordinary state. And you assume, because you have the memory, you assume you're still conscious. Think about this as a wild theory, it's not true and so on. Babies are born conscious, and then they're constantly forgetting that.
As they become an adult.
Become adults, And you see, this is Doris Lessing once put in one of her novels titled "Briefing for a Descent into Hell."
What novel was that? Sorry.
Briefing for a Descent into Hell. It's a short novel. It's really brilliant in terms of that background of ideas. All right. So there's this thing about consciousness. So this initial communication is just very interesting how quite a number of people have been inspired by, say, in search of the miraculous. And I can see myself where I was, as a student, and I say, no money or anything like that, in George's bookshop, which is near the university, and they had copies of Gurdjieff's Beelzebub's Tales. And I'd look at parts of it because I couldn't afford to buy it in the shop. And this part of the preface, and I still remember seeing on the page, it's good describing kind of phenomena within his own brain. And it would just immediately went, like this was direct perception. I read nothing like it. And so people get that because there can be this moment, especially when you're coming across it for the first time, or you're coming across it without expectations or naivety or innocence. But afterwards, when you get clever, then you got problems because you start explaining. And like a lovely line in the Magus, the Magus says, "Answers kill."
Or John Fowles Magus.
Exactly, in the film with I've forgotten his name now. The main
I've never seen the film. I didn't know there was a film, but there you go. I have to look that up.
Well, look at it. They only filmed half the novel, and Nicholas F. was played by Michael Caine. And I still remember I won't get into movies, or I might attempt to get into movies, but yes, that sort of thing. But there we come. So still got this, there's something, and there's a lot of, I think, missing of kind of sociological research about what happens to people when they pick up this thing and respond to it. Why don't they pick up and other people don't respond to it? Because in a way, you are faced with this challenging and difficult to deal with statement. You, my dear fellow, are just a walking machine. Thank you very much. But let's go on to this. So that's the initial thing, and for whatever reason, you persist in some way, and then you do this rigmarole finding somebody to teach you something or other. And so people go around looking what they call a group, looking for movements classes, reading more books and all the rest of it. And it's a kind of very interesting random process, hazardous process, because who knows who you will meet and what will influence you.
Who you can trust, who you know is a true teacher, or are you so in need of a teacher that you just go with anyone and then find out that that teacher is not the right teacher? There's so many things out there that go on.
It is genuinely hazardous, and so it was easy. Like I had an old friend of mine in America, then he was in that generation in the 70s, sort of footloose and fancy free, has some dollars in her pocket, go to Europe, go on a plane and just run sits to this next to this old lady and they're chatting and she says, I'm going to this special school in Gloucestershire. Oh, that sounds interesting. So tells her about it, tells her my friend said, I might go there too. So it turns up, eventually gets admitted. You see, she hadn't read a single book about it, never heard of Gurdjieff or Bennett or anything like this. It just happened to sit to somebody on the plane. So there's this big mystery. And Bennett was very interested in this. He was very interested in synchronicity and how people got to it. It's not logical at all. You know, it's just something. And he used his mystical term will pattern as a will pattern. And you get attracted in certain ways. Gurdjieff called it the magnetic center. And it's something you can't quite put your finger on anyway. But you get there and you learn these things. Like those people, about 500 more who went to Bennett's school in Sherborne, they came out packed with all these 100 inner exercises, some movements and some psychological ideas and cosmology about triads, this, that, and the other, stuffed to the gills, so to speak, and staggered out into the world and go forth and multiply and all that. And so tried to make their way, but it's going down to all these various people who, all the various ways have picked up something, and you get this thing, you how does this relate to ordinary life? And so, Debbie, you remember we were talking about, I've gone into how we got onto it, about, I think it's to do with our interests and what we were doing on kind of the things which concerned us, the writing and research and so on. There you go. And I got onto reading, which is one of my obsessions, because I really like Gurdjieff saying to Ouspensky, as reported, Ouspensky, you cannot read. And there was this leading intellectual of Russia at the time. There was this spirit saying, you can't read. And he said, if you could read even your own books, I would sit at your feet. And if things gone to place, I believe he was straight. And I think reading is, like many of our human activities, we get something which is like, I don't know, call it a starter kit for the lack of anything else, which you then have I would say, an obligation to develop.
Yes, to follow on with, you know, don't just read it and think, oh, that was interesting, put it down and look at something else.
But think how you might one day not be concerned with what you are reading, but how you are reading. See, the arrow then points at looking out, you know, this wonderful book, this wonderful writer, this illuminating book, and always looking, you see, you're always looking out, trying to find these terms, or even like looking for the wonderful teacher who's going to make you enlightened. All it's looking out and looking out and looking out. And so when does it turn around and say, whatever I'm coming across, it is so because of me. So there's something in me which might be significant for altering the way I see things, for doing it, because it means all the time whatever I'm doing is the same thing. Because I'm doing it.
Kernel inside you, just a little bit that's kind of prodding you, as if to say, hello, wake up.
Wake up. And how do we wake up? And then I go back to the thing. There's various terms, like I think in one, a shock. There is. I love this book by the Czech writer Conrad, and I've only read it once, which I found it shattering, and I do always recommend it to people who want to know about the literature of consciousness, because it, for me, is one of the absolutely rare stories which depicts a man waking up. And I'll give you the story because I find it's interesting context, if you don't mind.
Never heard of this from
well, there's this chap who works in the city. He's completely bourgeois. He's got a bowler hat with his case and things and so on. And he comes home to his house, finds his wife has left him. He leaves a note saying blah 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 blah. This kind of thing. He's there confronting himself, and kind of begin to convey the absolute genius, because Conrad was a genius. It makes him facing this impact is a shock. Now, a shock in that sense doesn't entail that you wake up, because it's also how the person takes it, and there is a mystery in this. Because it's like a 2-point of hazard, and though you get what is called a bifurcation, you can go down or you can go up. And God knows why you go one or the other, but something happened to this guy. So he goes through all the inner transformation, and his wife returns and says she's had second thoughts and talks to him and all this kind of thing. And then the upshot is it's absolutely beautiful, because he just walks out of the house and doesn't know what's going to happen. He just walks out of the house. So it's wonderful.
So it's kind of like the theme of going back to what was normal before, or to going into the unknown.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful. They made a movie of it, which wasn't very good, because it is into the social aspect. Because it's very hard, because you find people don't pick up, even literature and so on this phenomenology of waking up. You see, why do you think there are hardly any books, novels and so on, which depict people going through this transformation consciousness? It's almost non-existent. And what you get in novels is actually quite harmful in a way, because they had people going on and on through this same mechanical process, and it's all the pretense of making choices and seeing things and understanding and changing. But it's tried, you can see the whole process is pure mechanism. It reminds me, I once asked Bennett about what do you think was the most important novel in the 20th century? And he said, immediately, of course, he always has an answer for everything. Ulysses, Joyce's book.
And it's so difficult.
Oh, I've only read it once, so I thought it just absolutely funny. He said, why? Why was it? And he said, because it's brilliantly depicts the life of an ordinary man. But it's just, it remained with me, because it's to display that requires consciousness. You can't display the sleeping man unless you are awake. This is very important. So it's a whole mystery about and I wrote, I was so happy when my friend Josiah approved of it, a paper some decades ago about the human actor, and about acting in relationship to this actually being awake, and it's still the theme which I'm exploring with Josiah. But anyway, come back to life. I know so you get this idea of this somehow this turning around into yourself. Now, this can be taken, then you're in front of it. How do I do this? Because you got this, you know very well this theme in the work, self-observation. But you, I think, are also very well aware of things like I'm trying to remember his name, this the American director who wrote stories about Gurdjieff. Anyway, he asked him about self-observation, and he said, and it may also be in connection with Raj's group in New York. He said self-observation, what you do is not self-observation only, a form of what do you call it? Psychopathology. He said it was the whole attack on Raj's group in New York was that they emphasized self-observation, but he said it was turning them into candidates for lunatic asylum, you know. And I really caught on to it years ago. I was dealing with groups, however way I was trying to deal with groups, and so on. I just kept in ground to say this way of self-observation. For example, I say it was making people, and this is held up as virtue, dull, stifling people, and I could get no sense of it being done in the right way, assuming I had some sense of what the right way would be, but it's true, because it's not introspection.
You think they were becoming too obsessed with looking at themselves, maybe?
Well, yeah, of course, they're obsessed with themselves is a part of doing it wrong, because there's so little guidance written about it. I'm astonished at all the stuff you get, blah, 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 and self-observation. You get the occasional bit from Gurdjieff saying you're not doing it anyway, you don't understand what it is. And there's nothing in between. How do you do it? Now, my friend Russell, we're speaking with him a fortnight or so about, actually about the emotional center. But, he wrote this book on Gurdjieff's transformational psychology, saying that he got these fantastic pointers from Gurdjieff, but to make it work, you've got to go and find out how to do some things. Got to learn stuff.
Schreiber's book, which is a brilliant book. I have a copy of that. Just
good.
That are watching, so that we know what book we're talking about.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But you see, you can't. He gives a very useful guidance that if in genuine self-observation, there is always new information. What you tend to get most reports on self-observation is a continuance of the old observations. Round and round and round and round. A genuine self-observation takes you by surprise.
Well, okay, I'm having a bit of a revelation happening here as you're saying all this, so I've obviously needed to hear this.
Connection.
Brilliant.
Because Isn't it?
People asking me to do shows on self-observation. I'm not doing it because I don't know how to explain it to people. But you've just done a wonderful job of that. Fantastic, thank you. But this is so that people can understand.
That's right. I'm sorry.
To figure out what we're trying to do when we're doing that self-observation. And I've had emails from people who I can see are going too far into observing themselves and getting absorbed in that self-observation. And I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's inauthentic.
Best, but hopefully they'll watch this show and can see where we're coming at. So please do carry on. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's absolutely important to watch. Absolutely, because this is I think the art of it, for me, the promise of all this, whatever all this I can point to is that it's collaborative. It's in communion with other people. It's not sitting in a room by yourself reading clever books and, as you say, doing that kind of self-observation. That's going to lead you down the tubes. That's absolutely useless, And all these stories of Gurdjieff, and there he was, shouting, raging, a passionate man, doing whatever it was. People trying to becoming constipated, because that's one description of most people's self-observation is constipation, and they get it all wrong. You see, it's the whole point. You see, you got there, which it's the way you do it that matters. You take the words and you sink for start off, you think you understand what it means. It's again the old bloody background of assumptions. You hear a word, you say, I know what it is, I'll go and do it. And they fuck up.
You know what I
Because,
think with assumers? The first three letters of the word. Don't assume anything. Make sure ass. Verify, verify, verify.
but even I'm suspicious, verification. I think it's a very misleading
Right.
injunction. I say, because I think it's very important. I'll go off on a whole rant soon about the holy denying force, but it's necessary to learn how to falsify something. It's absolutely easy to verify anything you like. If you like it enough, you're going to want to verify it.
So you said it's better to, not better, but you was using the word falsify.
Falsify. Because this is my background, you see, in the philosophy of science. It's a tribute to a man called Popper. He said, what makes things scientific is not verification, it's because it's vulnerable to falsification. It's that vulnerability which makes it scientific. Because if it's not vulnerable, then you can go on building your castles in Spain. Which is, you know what I mean, you see. So you get this question, how to do it. And there is the making observations, Mr. Benedict Sherborne, as he was at Kunstrings before, had these observations. And he was usually in those days quite relatively kind and so on. People come up with blah, blah, and he knows all to say, this is not a genuine observation, because he had to cultivate his sense and or taste. And it's a Sufi word for zawak. It means taste. You get the taste of it, and this gives you this organic detector for this sort of this genuineness, and it's very, very precious. This taste, you see, and somebody in his role, he could do something, only something towards cultivating this taste by welcoming when he sees signs of it, and warning. He saw it being obscured by wiseacring, sentimentality. Also, what is called in Sufism, the judging nafs, which is one of the, taken to be Rumi, for example, is, I think it's Rumi, is one of the features which is an obstruction to transformation. It's the judging nafs. It's like loathing oneself, criticizing oneself, and all this kind of thing. This is the judging nafs. Nafs is a passion. It's the animal passion, so to speak. And that's, you see, nothing can be done with the nafs, you see, except understanding them, getting them into their place, because the real spirituality comes something else. But you get people, and I've seen people in groups whinging about, they saw how bad they were, or this, that, the other, and whinging about themselves, and everything goes on and on. It's absolutely useless, because in true self-observation, it's clean. There is no judgment. This is what makes it precious. And I could see, I don't know if it's true, Gurdjieff saying about this anger about the way it's being treated, because they're ruining it. And this opportunity, and I think Russell's very clear about this too, because it was without this call it genuine information you get from the self-observation, you see it as it is, then you don't mess it up. Now, you will know that literature well enough. You say, well, you say, don't change anything. You see something, you say, call it wrong. You see, but already in problems, you call it wrong. But people want to say, oh, I'll change myself, I'll improve. Like the whole world in this literature, everything on television, all about people say, oh, I will change, isn't it? And they're full of this. It's crap. As if you get an idea or thought, I can change. It's totally wrong, totally deluded, absolutely. And you just stay with it. Let it be as it is. And it's it itself will enter into you and begin to educate you. As soon as you get into I want to improve myself. I want to change this. You're covering up, covering up, covering up. You know, it's not telling you. Now this is, you see, it's everywhere. It's all connected up. Gurdjieff tells us a chapter towards the end. He talks about the reason of knowing, reason of understanding. This is the reason of understanding, where the impression is the active force, not your own mind. And so you have to know, this is for me a real meaning of the Islamic word of Islam, which is submission. Okay? Not like all the, well, I won't go on about conspiracy theorists and this kind of thing, but this kind of right wing and so on, this rejection all the time. It won't, that there is something, I mean, Shah used the term once, I thought it was very good, superior information. He said, there is superior information around. He said, but what most people are doing all the time are practicing what is called abolition of impact. There's something which happens. And what most of us will do most of the time is explain it away or turn it into something which belongs to our worldview and we are familiar with, you see, to allow it to really strike us. I go back to that one example of literature of Joseph Conrad, a man, and he gets up and walks out of his house. Isn't it a wonderful image of freedom? You know, this is what it, and he steps, makes that step. This is how it is. But all these things, you know, how hard it is for people, you know, to stop explaining, to stop reacting, blah, blah, blah. This, oh, stop this, stop this, stop this. I tend myself to use the term as a convenience to suspend and say, okay, you're going to have your reactions anyway. You can't deny them. But I like the word suspend. You just so leave them floating in the mid-air, whatever it is. Or they say it's like a noisy pet. Go and sit in the corner.
Well, suspend also kind of carries you, doesn't it? So you're not getting rid of it. You're not dropping it to the ground. You're just suspending it there. So it's, what am I trying to say? Well, what you're saying, really.
Well, each of us has to put it in with. I think that's important. It's now how to allow something to be sustained inside. You know it. It's the old widespread understanding, which is very practical, like in the martial arts. You don't react to what your partner, the other person is doing. You know, like they make a move towards you and you resist. You don't do that in martial arts, you know? I've done a small amount of it, you know, an old friend, Aikido, and I've even written about it, but I thought it was so striking, you know, all the basic things in Aikido. You go with your opponent's movement.
Use their energy for your energy,
Right.
back again. Yeah.
That's right. And in terms of things like meditation, I'm independent about this in terms of morning exercises and so on. I was thinking about, he was understanding what I was talking about was stopping thoughts. And he said, no, it's complete misunderstanding. You don't stop thoughts. So as you attempt to stop thoughts, you just give them energy. That's all you do. And it's like resisting in the battle, you're giving your energy is taken up by the person who's attacking. As you're putting him under his laws, his will, so to speak, of belonging to his world and his determination. You do the unexpected. This is, so we got onto this topic of self-observation that is absolutely precious, but I've not, well, I would say for myself, I believe in my belief in experiences with Bennett, and after that I could sort of, you know, see something I would call genuine and not genuine and get the taste of it. Is to some degree, but it was, I could see also that it was impossible to convey to the person who didn't get it what they're doing, because you have to get this taste. And so I don't know. You can't give people the taste, you see, they can only come to it. And there is a lot of hazard in this in groups, you know, and the group leaders, and how aware the group leader is of what's really happening in people, and the genuineness and so on. And some group leaders can have very rigid expectations and prejudices about how things should be talked about and what sort of things should be talked about, and coerce people a lot. You know, I know Russell had talked about his early experience of people in nylon groups. They were just little petty fascists, you know, imposing their rule on people, because it has to be so sensitive. You've got to, people express things in their way, but to get that smell, that organic sense, because sometimes the best clue was for me was surprise. The person goes, "Oh, I like this is a story." I mean, it's not quite on the.
It becomes revelation, doesn't it? A revelation of some kind.
It's genuine. It's genuinely new information. In ordinary people's lives, they hardly get any genuine new information. It's all repetition and verification of what they know already, round and round and round and round. So they get stuck in the same bloody mill they always were. Now, I'll tell you this little story of Elizabeth. I really liked it. She was very down to earth. So she was in Cool Springs' house. And you had the old Mrs. Bennett, would say upstairs. She was getting rather gaga, and she'd have a bell to summon people to give her what she wanted and so on. And Elizabeth was with a brush and pan sweeping the stairs or something, had the bell. So she went up to the room, dealt with that, came down, and she looked and saw the brush and pan. So she said to her, "Who is the irresponsible person who left that lying around?" Then it hit her the next section. "Me." You see, it's like that. Well, that's that world of self-observation. You don't know with it. It's just bingo. And you've got to know, he who kisses the joy as it flies, may live to see eternity's sunrise. But this is why. So we come back to the poets. Can we bring the poetry into ordinary life? And so Blake would talk about eternity's sunrise, and you go, but this is the eternal sunrise. Is you. You imagine.
Try and encourage people to see what was really there and to let go of the, the everyday way of looking at things, didn't he? He was trying to get people to open their eyes.
Yeah. I've actually on that point with you. The sunrise of the eternity is you. You can ask this question in this scenario as I'm talking to you now. Who am I? Where am I? I don't know. Yeah. And that terror of the situation, I go on trotting on. I'm 81. Kick the bucket, that's it. Was I ever truly me in all this time? What does it mean? All these tastes, you see, it's the terror of the situation. There's something frightening in it also, which puts people off. Now, let's go back to the thing about doing everyday tasks, if we ever were on it. And you see, it's a general cultural comment that it's the old thing which has been described in many ways and so on. It's about the outer directedness and inner directedness. You see, what we'd have before, you see, when I talked earlier on, I think about the divorce that went between the work and life. You see, life is outer directedness. You've got a family to feed, work to do, a house to clean, and all that kind of bus to catch, and then the inner directedness, I'm sitting in a meditation, becoming aware of my higher self, or whatever you're supposed to be aware of, you see. And it's like the one is one and the one the other, as neither the twain shall meet, to paraphrase Rudyard Kipling. You see what I mean? But you see these two divided. And just see, it's just crying out the obviousness. The real work starts when you bring these two together. It's the meeting, which is right. And this is this fundamental principle, is the relatedness, is the triad, is the threefold. You bring these independent together and something new is made, which is a degree of freedom. This is what it does. And so it is not enough to, I may have to, that's annoying, isn't it? What should we do?
Do you want
Should
me
we put
to
a pause
pause,
or
or
something?
should we bring this to an end so you can get the phone, or what would you
Will
like?
you pause?
I can pause. I shall pause. Right, sorry, we're back. We had a phone call, but we're back.
It was very good, actually, because it was an interruption. And what happens with the interruption, in a way, I would say one loses consciousness. You think, not really, just, I was talking to my daughter, and I went to my wife, and seeing you, I'm drinking my tea. You see, I'm conscious.
I'm being conscious. I'm paying full attention. I'm aware that the window is open for a nice breeze to come in, and at the same time, I'm having conversations with you.
You've got your window open. My God, you are a hardy soul. I think so many useful kind of elements of the work. I don't know if they ever really brought together. It's like be awful, like a book of tips on how to work on yourself or something like that, or being conscious for dummies, whatever it might be.
I'm sure someone's probably done that.
I suspect so. It strikes me then to be a bad move. And it is one of the items was this suddenly pointing out in the word. I couldn't actually specify exactly where it is in all literature, but it's out. And you move from one activity to another, there's an interval, and in that interval, you're not there. Or you just flip from one activity to one state to another, one action to another. This is what happens. And we have an inbuilt mechanism for sustaining continuity. It does this by a retrospective narrative. And so there's a lot of subtle exercises to do with catching that middle interval where there is, in a way, nothing. And there's a technique to that.
We want to be aware that we are nothing so that we can then work on that.
Yeah, but you see, if you're nothing, you can't be aware of. You see, this is the thing. It's the same. You don't believe it, and every time it happens, I go, what? So, and it becomes this other terrifying vista most of the time. You're just not there, and you've got all these, like, you do a drawing of yourself, it'd be like with a strobe light, so like dancing around strobe light, and you just like this going on. This is what you are. So you've got to have. You can see evolution produces this internal kind of continuous narrative which stabilizes us, enables us to do things, and to order memories and actions and all that kind of thing. How can we? So there's all that realm, which is quite chaotic, because you can only deal with it if it happens, and it happens erratically. You can practice to some degree not abolishing the impact by just staying with what you cannot easily accommodate. And that's a good thing. And it's all to do with stop the pretense. But we were talking about something earlier, just before our recorded conversation started. I'm trying to get back to something about this. So yes, it was is how you can, and this is a very general, I think quite safe advice or guidance thing, how you can bring yourself into what you do. Pausing to see if I can say something careful about this. It was something which for me arose, I had to refer to on Sunday, and in terms of things like listening to music and so on, you think of you listen to music or you don't listen to music, or listen to music or you not listen to music. This is absolutely not true, because there's a question, how are you listening to the music? And probably, I think it'd be fair, one of my fair generalizations, critical generalizations about people in general, in the kind of thing, and how to listen. You sit down, you put on the radio, a tune, you like it, so there you are, that's it. And something you don't like, you switch it off. And maybe afterwards you sing it in the bath, or all these, those
Yeah.
ordinary stuff. But you see, for me, I know something we actually Leslie was pointing out, in terms of music, which was a drawing. You find something to do which brings you into the game. I call it a game for the lack of a better word, the action, this action the use is going on. But firstly, the music's out there again, And
because this implies to everything. It's not just how you listen to music, how you read a book, how you walk down the street. It's everything.
yes. Now, there is, I suppose, a tendency. I'm just exploring it with you now in this time. I've got the answer, of course. And it's about, that thing, if you're walking down the street and so on, you think, what would be the point of me being aware of how I'm walking down the street? I'm just walking down the street, goddammit. I want to get to the shop before it shuts or something like that, you see. And you get it's more like that side of that thing where about sensation, you've read about sensation in the books and so on. It's very, very fundamental practice about this intimate direct awareness, which is physical. We'll call it physical as a shorthand. And I remember people, especially with an old Irish lady, she would say, well, what do I want to be aware of my body for? I'm not aware of my body unless I'm in pain. And I thought, my God, this is the attitude. It's all this, what's the point?
It's taken for granted.
In front of you, I put my hands out, I notice them, then they begin to tingle. And I think, what is this entertainment, self-entertainment, like as a kind of masturbation? I can have this sensation in my hands, But it's just, now, some people actually, I know, actually practice this way of being if they decide to do it, like talking to somebody like I'm talking to you, would bring sensation into the hands. That means they're making something, they're doing something as a contribution to the action. It's not apparent from the outside, but there is that contribution to the action, that I'm in front of you, and then I'm bringing myself to be really here with you. I'm not just lying back and yak, 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 I'm doing something, especially if you do something physical, this kind of thing. Or breathing, you see, as we find ways of doing that, and it supports, here I'm just thinking aloud at the moment, that thing which I always thought was very crucial, coming back to conversation and so on, when you come on the topic or a theme of talking about something. Hope this doesn't develop. It's really there, what we're talking about. It's really between us, it's there. This is, for whatever reason, there is this kind of magnetism, this attraction, the conversation builds. And it's like this I don't know, isn't it? It cooks and something, there is a transformation in it. And this is something which we can assist. Do that through having had these tastes, because it gives us a discrimination. Yeah. And because also the tastes have something in them which also attracts us.
And hopefully keeps us motivated.
Yes, that's right. Yes, you like very important, in birth, like that of arts and taste and so on, and have a lovely old phrase you don't use it very often. You say good taste, have good taste. It's this discrimination to what is finely done and not coarsely done, what is how they sort of genuine or pastiche, all these kinds of things. So there's a judgment in the really cognitive sense. It's discriminatory, and you do it sort of immediately. But it's built on this self-education. Let's call it like that. So then, all about motivation is a question. If you go around just say sensing your right hand, after a time it gets a bit boring and pointless, because you've got to say what's it for, and you get on to this why do it. And I was talking to you earlier about these three conditions: what are we doing, how are we doing it, and why are we doing it, as a useful checklist, so to speak. And the why is often more difficult, and the why, you see, always has to do with what Gurdjieff called aim. And he meant it aim beautifully, practically. It's a point of reference for throughout your life and so on, to relate what you're doing to your aim. Does it serve my aim? Does it not serve my aim? Even if you have to say to yourself, well, what I'm doing now is just passing the time. Okay, you've got to know that. But you find ways of connecting all the various things you do with your aim. So you refine your aim as well as your connections till they begin to match. And therefore you get nourishment. And I even will say this, just came to me, give us this day our daily bread. That's how you get your daily bread. Oh, that's, wow. I just thought of that. This is how you get your daily bread. This is what the work is really about, your daily bread.
It's in your manna.
Manna. Yeah. Right. It's not just simply falling from the sky, but it's in. And this would be wonderful to have this sense in every action you're doing. There's something from within you can come something which enters into what you're doing. You're not just a robot, an automatism. Because if you put something yourself in, it's fresh. It's uniquely for this time, as before it was a routine.
You're trying to be real.
It's something real. And of course, you must say, be practical about it. You don't try to do it all the time. It's trying to do it all the time. It's just being stupid. You can't. There's something about a finitude of our energy or opportunities. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Well, that's why Gurdjieff says do them, specify a time, your own time, and select a time and do it then, doesn't he?
Yes. It reminds me of one of Bennett's very practical talks about realism. The three kinds of realism I thought was very, very handy. It says the realism about the situation you're in. You've got to know it, what it is, its parameters and so on. You can't be ignorant. Then there's a second kind of realism about oneself, one's capacities, one's nature, one's disposition and so on. And then there's a third one about opportunity, because you can't just impose a regime on something. There's got to be what we call a capacity, an opening there, an opportunity for it. And that's the real third force perception. You've got to see, okay, so you don't do all these things as a routine, you don't do them all the time. But you know the word probably, the kairos. Or is it the favored moment? Is that the translation of it?
That's a better way of putting it. Yeah, I was going to say the select time, but yeah, you're right. The favored moment would be better.
So what a wonderful taste. So all that, I would see all those things like the taste of the favored moment and so on, it develops from all these practices. It's an ecology which builds, but right at the root of it is the you are a sleeping machine. You know, all that bad stuff, that's the part of it. That's where it begins. And then the rest is gravy. Because I believe, as soon as you start doing this, there's immediately a benefit, a plus, you know, but you've got to, of course, have that attitude of, how to say?
Of the going out to do it. It's not the sitting back and waiting for it to appear.
And sort of appreciating things in their own right is what I had in mind.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's not just I think this idea of appreciation is extremely important. It's, and it's not a kind of taste. It shows you have taste, you know, taste appreciation sometimes put together. You can appreciate because you can recognize the value in it. And this is always enlarging for one's world. You know too much you love drawings and paintings and so on. You know, you open to something, you're actually opening to another person's perception. And your world is enlarged. You know, this is, so I see it something like, and it's bound to be incomplete, this, what do we call it? Yeah, then came the word cultivation because it relates to farms and farming. It's when you, I'm going crazy here. We move from a hunter-gatherer regime to an agricultural regime. We have a farm and we cultivate this and grow these crops, and all these metaphors can be useful. But I think, this is going to be a general point, not so useful, but I said about the, you know, these work ideas about, you know, conscious awareness, attention, I don't know what else you call them, and it come into use, into play in sense, ordinary, immediate, practical moments,
Mm-hmm.
when something to do, something to respond to, or, you know, just that, and as could be, I'm really speculating here, a kind of elixir already in this, you know, just I'm thinking I had an argument with my wife earlier on, and then you think, oh, I want to correct this, change it. Useless, no. Just love the argument for its own sake. Because it's all a bonus. You know, and this is what I'll be having to explore with Russell on the 7th of March. You see, in this idiotic hangover in the work literature about negative emotions is really misunderstanding, because we only have what we have.
I think that's a wonderful place to end it on, if that's okay with you, Tony. And because you're going to be talking to Russell Schreiber with the Duversity crowd. And if people wanted to come to that, then they've got to come and check out the Duversity website, don't they? Which is duversity.org.
Yes.
Yeah, it's .org, isn't it? And obviously they can find out more about your own work there, because I think we've given everybody a real lot to think about today, hopefully. And I think we've got to a point where maybe they need to go and digest everything we've said. This might need a couple of views, this show, to take in everything that you've said, because you've said some very important stuff, very relevant stuff. You've given me a few surprises.
Well, you see, this is what we do together, Debbie. This is, you see, this is it. This is it. It's not, how to say it? What is it? You know what it's not.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much.
That's you, sweetheart.
Let me press the stop button.